we are going to study the anatomy of the eye. So here, drawn in front of you is a typical eyeball. So let's go ahead and look at the different layers and the different components that make up our eyes. The eye has three main layers. Starting from the more superficial, working our way deeper, we have the outer layer. So the outer layer is made up of two components, the sclera, and so the sclera here is also known as the white of the eye, and so it's made up of dense connective tissue. Okay, and it's also perforated through which blood vessels and nerves would enter, and it's also a tough layer, and this allows the attachment of muscles that are going to move the eyes. Okay, so attachment point. The second component of the outer layer is the cornea. And so this cornea is transparent, and this is where light enters the eye. So this is the most anterior portion of the eye, and it's made up of transparent cells and collagen fibers, and it's going to admit light into the eye. The second layer that we have, located a little bit deeper to the outer layer, is what we call the vascular layer. And the vascular layer is made up of the choroid, which you can see in red here. Choroid, red to represent blood vessels. So this is a highly vascular layer. Now the second component of the vascular layer is an extension of the choroid that we call the ciliary body. And this ciliary body is an extension of the choroid, and it's a muscular ring that's going to surround this lens here, which we will talk about shortly. So it's a muscular layer that surrounds the lens. Okay, and then what it also does is it's able to control the shape of the lens. Another function is it secretes aqueous humor, which we will also talk about shortly. The third component of this vascular layer is the iris. And so the iris is right here, it contains pigments, so it contains melanin. This is what gives you your eye color, but it's actually able to also control the diameter of the pupil. So the iris is going to control pupil diameter. Hence, it can regulate how much light is entering into the eye. Also contains melanin, as we mentioned. Finally, the third layer of the eye is the innermost layer, and this is what we call the retina. Okay, so we call this the inner layer, composed of the retina. And so the retina is a very important layer because this is where your neurons are located, especially your light receptors. So this contains light receptors that we call photoreceptors. Okay, as well as many other types of neurons that are going to process this visual information. And as they process this information, then they will send this visual information out of the eye and towards the brain. And this is going to be carried through what we call the optic nerve. Now, as the optic nerve exits the retina, what you'll notice is that right here, we do not have any light photoreceptors. So this here is also what we call the blind spot, also known as the optic disc. Okay, so the location where there are no light receptors, no photoreceptors to receive and interpret any light, it's the site at which the optic nerve is going to exit, and that's what we call the optic disc. So these are the three main layers of the eye, but we have a few more components to discuss. So the first component that we'll discuss is the lens. The lens, as you can see right here, is made up of transparent cells, and its function is to focus light rays as they come in through the eye. It's going to focus them on the retina. Okay, so transparent, and it focuses light on the retina. Next up, let's talk about the aqueous humor that we have mentioned previously. So we said that the ciliary body is going to produce aqueous humor, and what that is, this is a serous fluid. And this aqueous humor is going to circulate in the anterior section of the eye. And so the anterior region of the eye can be divided into a posterior chamber and an anterior chamber separated by the iris. So this right here, I'll number them A, or letter them A and B. So A is what we call the posterior chamber, and this is marked as the region between the lens and the iris. The anterior region is B, or chamber, and this is marked as the region between the iris and the cornea. And so this here is where aqueous humor is going to circulate, produced by the ciliary body. So what does it do? What does the aqueous humor do? It's responsible for lubrication of the eye. It's important for nourishment of the cornea, as well as the lens. And it's also important in maintaining intraocular pressure, so the pressure inside the eye. In fact, this aqueous humor is continuously being produced and drained, and so this is really important so that pressure does not build up, because when pressure of the aqueous humor builds up, this is what causes glaucoma. We also have a different type of humor that is located posterior to the eye. And so right here in the posterior segment, okay, so the anterior segment was anterior to the lens, made up of the posterior and anterior chambers. But next up, in the posterior segment of the eye, we have yet again another type of humor, and this is what we call the vitreous humor. So the vitreous humor is more of a transparent jelly than a fluid like the aqueous humor. And it's important because it is important for maintaining the eye structure. So maintains eye structure. And it also contains phagocytes, okay, which are cells that eat up any cell debris, phagocytize them, and break them down for protection. So phagocytosis of cell debris.